Imagine making a mistake so devastating that the only way to atone for it was to face impossible trials. Not one, not two, but 12 challenges no ordinary man could survive. Unbeatable monsters, sacred creatures, cruel kings, and even a journey into the realm of the dead. That was Hercules' punishment. But there's something most people miss about this story. The 12 Labors of Hercules are not just battles against monsters. Each challenge reveals a powerful lesson about discipline, mental toughness, and perseverance. And the final labor will force the hero to confront something even more terrifying than any creature in mythology: death itself. To understand the 12 Labors of Hercules, you first have to look at the beginning of the hero's downfall. Hercules, or Heracles in the original Greek tradition, was the son of Zeus, king of the gods, and a mortal woman. And that alone was enough to make his life a battlefield from the start, because Hera, Zeus's wife, hated him from the moment he was born. To her, Hercules was not just a child, he was the living reminder of betrayal. Even so, he grows up strong, admired, and famous for a level of power no one else could match. Everything seemed to point toward a glorious destiny. Hercules looked like the perfect hero, the kind of man who seemed capable of overcoming anything. But Greek mythology often returns to one hard truth: the greater the hero, the greater the fall can be. And Hera never stopped trying to destroy him. Instead of striking him down with lightning or monsters right away, she does something even worse. She drives Hercules into a supernatural madness. He loses all sense of reason, and in that state of insanity, he commits the worst act of his life. He kills his own wife, and he kills his own children. When the madness passes, Hercules wakes up to an unbearable reality. The strength that once made him admired means nothing now. Fame no longer matters. All that remains is guilt, pain, and despair. This is where the story changes. Hercules stops being just a strong man from myth and becomes someone trying to survive the weight of what he has done. He searches for answers. He searches for redemption. He searches for a way to keep living after a mistake so catastrophic. So he turns to the Oracle of Delphi, and the answer he receives changes his life forever. To atone for his crime, Hercules must serve King Eurystheus and carry out a series of impossible tasks. These would not be ordinary tests. Each challenge would place the hero before something greater than monsters and danger. They would force him to confront limits he would have to overcome both outwardly and inwardly. Because the 12 Labors did not test Hercules' strength alone. They tested his discipline, his patience, his self-control, his ability to think, and above all, his ability to keep going. And it all begins with the first challenge, a mission that looked simple at first glance, but would quickly show Hercules that from this point on, brute force alone would never be enough. Hercules' first labor makes one thing clear right away: this journey would be anything but simple. The mission seemed straightforward: kill the Nemean lion, a monstrous creature terrorizing the region, one that no one had been able to defeat. For any other warrior, that alone would have been terrifying. But there was one detail that made it even worse. The lion's skin was impenetrable. No arrow could pierce it, no sword could cut it, no weapon worked. And this is where the first labor stops being just a fight against a monster. It becomes a test of intelligence and adaptation. Hercules arrives as a hero used to strength, used to combat, used to winning through force. But standing before the lion, he discovers a truth that changes everything. Courage and brute strength are not always enough, because no matter how hard he attacked, nothing happened. And that is one of the most interesting parts of the story. The challenge was not simply to defeat the creature. It was to realize in the middle of the fight that doing the same thing over and over would be the fastest road to defeat. So Hercules does what a true hero must do when the usual path no longer works. He changes. He abandons his weapons. He trades conventional combat for a direct hand-to-hand struggle with no protection, no distance and no advantage, no bow, no sword, no shield to save him. Just the hero in front of the beast, relying on his own strength and the decision not to back down. The fight is brutal. On one side, a monster that seemed invincible. On the other, a man who had to discover a new way to win. And that is how Hercules manages to overpower the lion and kill it with his bare hands. Afterward, he uses the creature's own claws to skin it and turns its hide into armor. And that carries a powerful symbolism. What once threatened him becomes his protection. What nearly destroyed him now walks beside him. This first labor teaches a powerful lesson. Very often the problem is not the size of the obstacle, it is that the person keeps trying to overcome it the same way. Some challenges do not require more strength, they require change, they require awareness, they require adaptation. And Hercules learns that in his very first trial. After defeating the Nemean lion, Hercules moves on to an even more terrifying challenge. Now he must face the Hydra of Lerna, a monstrous creature living in a dark swamp, terrorizing the entire region. The Hydra was not just large or vicious, it seemed built to defeat any warrior through exhaustion. Its body was massive, its breath was poisonous, and its many heads made the fight even more dangerous. But what truly made it a nightmare was something else. Every time Hercules cut off one head, two more grew back in its place. In other words, the more he attacked, the worse things became. Strength was not enough, fearlessness was not enough. Hercules was facing the kind of problem that grows precisely when it is confronted in the most obvious way. He fought, he struck, he persisted, but nothing truly solved it. On the contrary, with every attempt, the challenge seemed to multiply right in front of him, until Hercules realizes that alone, he will not win this way. So he calls on Iolaus, his nephew, to help him. From that moment on, the battle changes. Hercules cuts off the Hydra's heads, and Iolaus immediately cauterizes the necks with fire, preventing new ones from growing back. For the first time, the monster begins to lose its advantage, and little by little what looked impossible begins to give way. The great lesson of this labor is right there. Some problems cannot be solved with brute force. Some battles get worse when a person keeps pushing without strategy, and there are moments when asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of intelligence. Hercules defeats the Hydra, but he leaves that battle understanding something essential. Not every victory happens through solitary struggle. Sometimes the solution appears when a person recognizes they do not have to carry everything alone. And after facing an enemy that became more dangerous with every strike, the next labor would demand something completely different. It would not be a test of strength, it would be a test of patience. After facing brutal monsters, Hercules receives a very different challenge. This time his mission is to capture the Ceryneian hind, a sacred animal belonging to Artemis, and that changes everything. He cannot kill it, he cannot injure it, he must capture it alive. But the hind is incredibly fast, light and difficult to catch. It is not an enemy to be beaten in combat. It is the kind of challenge that forces Hercules to slow down and act carefully. According to tradition, the pursuit lasts an entire year, and that detail says a lot about this labor. Here victory does not come from a dramatic clash, but from the ability to keep going without rushing. Hercules follows the animal across long distances, studies its movements, and waits for the right moment to act. In the end, he captures it without harming it. That is what makes this labor so symbolic. Hercules learns that not every victory depends on force. Some require time, control, and consistency. The lesson is clear. Some victories do not come through intensity, but through quiet persistence. And after a trial defined by patience, the next challenge would require another skill altogether. The fourth labor takes Hercules into the mountains of Erymanthus, where a gigantic boar lived, destroying everything in its path. It was a violent creature, difficult to control, spreading fear through the villages of the region. At first glance, it looked like just another problem to solve with strength. But Hercules realizes that attacking head-on would not be the smartest approach. Instead of charging into a direct confrontation, he changes his method. He drives the animal toward an area covered in deep snow, where the terrain starts working in his favor. The boar slows down, becomes exhausted, and grows more vulnerable. Only then does Hercules move in and capture it alive. This labor shows something important. Winning does not always mean striking harder. Very often it means understanding the situation, waiting for the right moment, and forcing the challenge to lose its advantage. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Strength without strategy can become wasted effort. Hercules wins because he does not let impulse control him. He observes, calculates, and uses the environment to his advantage. And that is exactly what makes this labor a test of discipline, not just power. But the next challenge would be unlike any of these, because this time, Hercules would not face a monster in the open. He would have to complete a task that seemed humiliating and nearly impossible. The fifth labor seemed less heroic than the ones before it, but it was one of the most absurd. His mission was to clean out King Augeas' stables in a single day. And these were no ordinary stables. They had gone uncleaned for years, filled with filth from an enormous number of animals. It was the kind of task that seemed impossible, precisely because it did not require courage in battle. It required facing something exhausting, disgusting, and overwhelming. Hercules could have tried to solve it through sheer effort, as if every problem had to be conquered through raw labor. But he quickly understands that if he does it that way, he will never finish in time. So he does something different. Instead of cleaning everything with his own hands, he studies the land around him and finds a much more intelligent solution. Hercules diverts the course of 2 nearby rivers and sends the water rushing through the stables, washing away all the filth in just a few hours. That is what makes this labor so memorable, because it shows that discipline is not only about enduring difficult tasks, it is also about knowing how to think before wearing yourself out for no reason. A lot of people associate strength with the ability to suffer through everything. But in this labor, Hercules reveals another kind of power, the power to find a better way. The lesson here is very clear. The greatest effort is not always the best solution. Sometimes real progress happens when a person pauses, analyzes the situation, and finds a smarter way forward. In the sixth labor, Hercules faces a very different kind of threat. This time, he must deal with the Stymphalian birds, monstrous creatures terrorizing the region. They had bronze claws, razor-sharp beaks, and feathers they could launch like arrows. In other words, they were not just aggressive animals, they were enemies that attacked from a distance and turned the sky itself into a danger zone. And that made everything harder, because it was not enough to have the strength to fight something on the ground. Hercules needed a way to strip those creatures of the advantage they held. Hidden around the lake and protected by the terrain, they seemed impossible to reach. Then Athena helps him by giving him a tool capable of producing a deafening sound. Hercules uses it to frighten the birds and force them out of hiding. Once they finally take flight, he seizes the moment to attack and defeat them. What this labor shows is something fascinating. Sometimes the hardest part is not defeating the problem, but getting it into the open. As long as fear stays hidden, it seems bigger, darker, and more impossible than it really is. But the moment it is brought into the light, it can finally be confronted. That is the lesson of this labor. Many fears seem invincible, until the moment someone decides to stop running from them. In the seventh labor, Hercules must face the Cretan bull, a gigantic beast spreading destruction wherever it went. It was brute force in its purest form, a violent animal, impossible to reason with, charging wildly and leaving chaos behind. And that detail matters, because in the face of something like that, the most instinctive reaction would be to destroy it, end the threat immediately, settle everything through force. But Hercules' mission was not to kill the bull. It was to capture it alive. That changes the meaning of the labor entirely. Now it is not enough to win the clash. Hercules must contain that force without being consumed by it. He must get close, withstand the impact, and above all, keep control in the middle of total disorder. And that is exactly what he does. Hercules faces the bull, absorbs its violence, and manages to overpower it through sheer strength until he can finally bring it back alive to Eurystheus. The image is deeply symbolic, because this is not just a labor about physical power, it is a labor about control, about the ability not to lose yourself in the middle of chaos, about being able to restrain something dangerous without becoming as uncontrolled as the thing you are fighting. The lesson here is this: true strength is not found in destroying everything that threatens you, it is found in mastering what seems impossible to control. And after restraining a creature driven by violence, the next labor would force Hercules to face something even more disturbing. This time, the danger would not lie only in the monster's strength, but in the kind of cruelty behind it. In the 8th labor, Hercules is sent to capture the mares of Diomedes, animals feared for a horrifying reason. They were fed human flesh. That alone makes this labor different from the ones before it. Here the horror is not just in the creatures, but in what was done to them. The mares became violent because they belonged to a cruel king who used his power to feed barbarity, and that changes the meaning of the mission. Hercules is not dealing only with savage animals. He is confronting a force corrupted by the evil of the one who controlled it. Before he can subdue the mares, he must face Diomedes himself, the man behind all that cruelty. When he defeats the king and delivers him to the same fate he had created for others, something changes. Without Diomedes' command, the mares calm down, and that is where the story reveals its most symbolic layer. The problem was not only the strength of the animals, it was the cruel use of that strength. This labor shows that power in the wrong hands can turn everything around it into something monstrous. And it also shows that the true enemy is not always the thing that looks most frightening at first glance. Sometimes the worst force is behind the scenes, controlling, feeding, and sustaining the chaos. The lesson here is clear. Power without responsibility creates monsters. In the 9th labor, Hercules is given the task of bringing back the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, and unlike many of the earlier challenges, this one does not begin with violence. Hippolyta does not appear as a blind enemy or an uncontrollable threat. In many versions of the myth, she is willing to hand over the belt. In other words, everything suggests that this mission could have been resolved without battle, without bloodshed, and without destruction. But that is exactly where the situation changes. Hera intervenes once again. She spreads the rumor among the Amazons that Hercules intends to kidnap their queen. And in a matter of moments, what could have been a peaceful encounter turns into a violent conflict. This part of the story matters because it shows that not every battle is born out of necessity. Sometimes it is born from lies, distrust, and manipulation. The conflict escalates quickly, takes over the entire situation, and something that seemed settled becomes a war. Hercules fights, wins, and completes the mission. But this labor leaves a different mark than the others. Because it shows that not every fight is inevitable, there are moments when the real problem is not the enemy's strength, but the chaos created between people. And when that happens, even something simple can become violent. The lesson here is clear. Not every battle needs to happen, but when it does, it takes courage to move through it. And after a labor shaped by tension and misunderstanding, the next challenge would demand something quieter, longer, and more draining. In the 10th labor, Hercules receives a mission that goes far beyond facing a single monster. He must retrieve the cattle of Geryon, a fearsome giant known for his strength and extraordinary nature. But even before the final confrontation, what makes this labor so difficult is the journey itself. To reach Geryon, Hercules has to cross vast distances, endure exhaustion, overcome obstacles along the way, and keep moving forward even when the destination still seems impossibly far away. And that changes the weight of the mission. This time the challenge is not only the final enemy, but everything that must be conquered before he even arrives. This is the kind of trial that wears a person down little by little, not with one single blow, not with one sudden shock, but through time, steady effort, and the demand to keep going without stopping. When he finally reaches his destination, Hercules still has to defeat Geryon and take the cattle. In other words, after the entire journey, the most dangerous part is still waiting for him. And even so, he keeps going, fights, and fulfills the mission. This labor carries a powerful lesson because it shows that not every victory depends on explosive courage or one dramatic moment of bravery. Some victories depend on endurance. They depend on the ability to keep going when the road is long, exhausting, and full of difficulty. They depend on emotional, physical, and mental stamina. The lesson here is simple and powerful. Great goals do not just require the strength to begin. They require the consistency not to quit halfway through. In the 11th labor, Hercules is given a mission that seemed almost unreachable: to bring back the golden apples of the Hesperides, sacred fruit guarded in a distant garden protected by a dragon. But this time, the problem was not only getting there, it was figuring out how to complete the task at all. because this labor involved mystery, distance, and a type of challenge that could not be conquered through strength alone. Hercules needed to find the path, understand who could help him, and deal with a situation in which acting on impulse would be a mistake. This is where the story takes on a different tone. To obtain the apples, Hercules turns to Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the sky. Atlas agrees to help and goes to retrieve the fruit while Hercules takes on that unimaginable burden for a moment. But when Atlas returns with the apples, he tries to deceive him. He sees a chance to escape his own punishment and wants to leave Hercules trapped there forever in his place. And this is where the hero shows something beyond strength. Instead of reacting impulsively, Hercules thinks. Calmly, he pretends to accept the arrangement and asks Atlas to hold the sky for just a moment while he adjusts the burden on his shoulders. Atlas, not realizing the trick, takes the sky back, and Hercules uses that opening to grab the apples and continue on his way. That is the true power of this labor. Hercules wins not because he fights harder, but because he understands the situation at the exact right moment. He realizes there are challenges whose solution lies not in direct confrontation, but in the intelligence to avoid the trap. The lesson here is very clear. There are problems that strength cannot solve. In those moments, what makes the difference is staying cool, reading the situation, and acting strategically. And after overcoming a trial in which the mind mattered more than muscle, Hercules approaches the final and most terrifying labor of them all. Because now he will not face only a monster, he will descend into the world of the dead. In the final labor, Hercules receives the most terrifying mission of his entire journey. He must descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the monstrous hound guarding the entrance to the realm of the dead. That command alone makes this challenge greater than all the others, because until then, Hercules had faced terrible creatures, cruel kings, and nearly impossible tasks. But now he would have to enter the place the living feared most, the domain of Hades. In some versions before this descent, Hercules even prepares himself spiritually to enter that forbidden world. That helps show that the final labor is not just a physical struggle. It is a crossing, a direct encounter with everything that represents endings, darkness, and absolute fear. And this is where an important detail enters the story. Hercules does not simply storm the underworld, seize Cerberus, and leave. In one of the best-known versions, he meets Hades and asks permission to take the creature. Hades agrees, but imposes a harsh condition. Hercules must subdue Cerberus without using weapons. In other versions, this permission is also associated with Persephone, queen of the underworld. That makes the scene even more powerful, because the final labor would not be won with a sword, a spear, or any outside advantage. After everything he has been through, Hercules reaches the point where he must rely only on what he has built throughout the journey, his strength, his courage, and his self-control. So he descends into the land of the dead, and that image alone is powerful. Hercules enters a place no one wanted to return from, surrounded by the presence of death and standing before the creature that blocked all passage. Cerberus was not just a savage monster. He was the symbol of the final boundary, the line separating the living from the dead. When the moment of confrontation comes, Hercules faces the beast with his bare hands. No weapons, no distance, no tricks. It is a direct, brutal, and deeply symbolic struggle. And even as he is bitten and crushed by that monstrous creature, he does not let go. He does not retreat. He does not break. Not until he finally subdues Cerberus and brings him back to complete the mission. Afterward, the creature is returned to the underworld. And that is exactly why this labor closes the journey so magnificently. Because in the end, Hercules is not just defeating one more enemy. He is confronting the deepest fear that exists. He is crossing into the darkest place in mythology and coming back alive. The final labor shows that the greatest test of a hero is not only defeating monsters on the outside. It is moving forward even in the face of what feels impossible to confront. That is the final lesson. The greatest fear does not disappear on its own. It has to be faced. And when Hercules returns from the underworld with Cerberus, he is no longer just the man who completed 12 impossible tasks. He returns as someone transformed by everything he had to endure. After completing the 12 labors, Hercules was no longer the same man who began the journey. At the beginning, he was remembered for his strength, for his impact, for the image of someone capable of defeating anything. But along the way, it becomes clear that the Labors were not simply placing monsters in front of him. They were shaping the hero. Each challenge demanded something different. At one point, he had to change his strategy. At another, he had to accept help. Then, he had to learn to wait, to think, to endure, to control himself, to keep going, even when the weight of the journey felt too great. And that is what makes this story so powerful. The 12 Labors of Hercules are not just a sequence of impossible trials. They are a journey of transformation. Because in the end, Hercules' greatest achievement was not killing legendary creatures or surviving missions no one else could have completed. It was not coming out of the journey the same way he entered it. The Greeks understood something deeply profound in this story. True heroism is not only about defeating what threatens you from the outside, it is about being transformed by what you confront within. And maybe that is why the story of Hercules still speaks so powerfully today, because at its core it reminds us that discipline does not arrive fully formed, it does not appear overnight, it does not emerge without pain, effort, and consistency. It is built slowly, challenge after challenge, choice after choice, fall after fall, until one day the person realizes they are no longer the same, just like Hercules. If this story made you see Hercules in a completely different way, then it is worth hitting like and subscribing to the channel, because here mythology is not just treated as a collection of ancient legends, but as a body of stories filled with meaning, symbolism, and lessons that still feel alive today. And what makes Greek mythology even more fascinating is that things are almost never as simple as they seem.